apples. How do you get different types of apples? Well, you transplant one type of apple with another type of apple, and you create a new variation of an apple. Basically, it would be a hybrid of the two apples. I mean, so to speak. It would be a different variation of an apple. And that's how you get different variation of apples. Well, taking a blackberry and raspberry, it's, the same way. You plant. Now, there's more to this process than just planting one blackberry seed and one raspberry seed. Obviously, there's there's a process to it. Now, I'm not saying that I'm an expert at this, but we all know, this is what I'm saying, is every single person knows that you can take a raspberry and a blackberry and transplant and get another plant. Obviously, because this has been done before. And that's what I'm saying with apples. It's the same thing. You can take two different types of apples and, essentially transplant them. Again, obviously, the process is, there's more to that process. But basically, you're taking two apples and you are transplanting the two seeds, and you're creating a different type of apple tree, or a new variation of an apple tree. Well, same thing with orange and a lemon. An orange and a lemon you can transplant, and you're gonna come up with a fruit tree, like a different type of fruit tree, like a different type of lemon, so to speak, like a different hybrid of a lemon, a different variation of, a lemon. And so you can do this, but you need to have the right fruit group. Like, you cannot, take an orange and transplant it with an apple. That doesn't work. You cannot take an orange and transplant it with a watermelon. That doesn't work. You cannot take a watermelon and transplant it with squash. That doesn't work. You cannot take a watermelon and transplant it with a pickle. That also is not going to work. It has to be from the same family that the watermelon comes from. Like, and I don't know exactly the family branch that watermelon comes from, but it has to be that same family. You know, and when you look at animals, animals are very similar to plants. You can take a dog and breed it with another type of dog, and like a black lab and a German shepherd. You can breed the two and create a half breed. And same thing with cats, and then the same thing with a bear. You can take a black bear and a brown bear, breed the two, and get a half breed. And then obviously a lion and a tiger, you get a liger, right? However, you cannot take a dog and cat and breed a dog and cat and get some kind of new species. That is impossible. And we know this fact. We know this fact. But then somehow we still think that we can evolve from monkeys to humans. Well, if I just described how you cannot create a new species from taking a dog and cat and create a new species, then why do we still believe that humans came from monkeys and monkeys came from some other creature? Well, let me put it to you this way. It's because the evolutionists, well, they're crazy, for one, but the evolutionists, see, they believe that we all share the same, we all come from the same living organism, like one living organism, that we all come from this one living organism. That's the evolutionist belief. But take what I just described to you. Animals. If a dog doesn't come from a cat, how can a dog and a cat, come from the same living organism? That's impossible. So we know that we come from different, like per se. I mean, we are different. A human being does not come from that one living organism. Like, I am different from a dog. I cannot mate with a dog and create a new species. Therefore, I must have, been created unique. I would have been created as a different species. So, this idea that we all come from one living organism is clearly blown out of the water just by this one statement. You cannot take a dog and breed it with a cat and create a new species. That is impossible. That does not happen. You can only take a dog and breed it with another dog. Only. So, which means that dogs is a completely different species. That means they hold different cells, different genes, different, different genomes than a cat. And if a dog holds separate genes and, all this scientific terms and whatnot, if they hold different genomes than a cat holds, how can a dog and a cat come from the same living organism? Impossible. Impossible. So, with that, just with that, you can see how the evolutionists are. They're crazy. They're completely out of their minds, and they need to wake up and smell the coffee. So evolutionists out there, wake up and smell the coffee. We do not come from just one living organism. And creationists have been proving this over and over and over. That's one thing that the creationists have, clearly shown time and time again, and there's still people that believe in evolution. Okay. You would be like, well, what about other things? Is there other things that creationists have been able to, prove false? Yeah, there is. There's tons of documentaries that creationists have done. You need to do your job and look those documentaries up. I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to spend this whole video explaining to you everything that the creationists have found. Do your research. Do me a favor. Look into it. Do your own research. Stop taking what they have taught you in school and just believing it. Okay? For instance, one example would be, well, how do you get hills? Well, the evolutionists will say that, well, wind blew settlement, certain things of settlement, like maybe sand or maybe, dirt particles or sand particles, and over time that built up and made a hill. Time out. Have you gone to a beach, put sand in your hand, and just tossed it up into the air? What does that sand do? That sand falls back down, for one thing. It falls back down. Now, yes, maybe if there's wind, it might carry it some distance. But wait, how far do you think wind is going to carry these sand particles that you throw up in the air on a windy day? Not very far. So that's kind of hard to actually, like, when you think about it, that's actually kind of hard to believe. Think about this. During Noah's flood, and don't say that Noah's flood was just a local flood, or don't say that, well, that's impossible, whatever. No, it's not impossible. It is not impossible to have a global flood ripping apart Earth. You can easily take a bucket full of dirt or sand, pack it down nice and tight, then pour water into it, get like a water hose or something, stick it in there at the, bottom, turn it on. Guess what's going to happen? The water is going to demonstrate how it can completely just tear what you put in the bucket and smash down. It's going to demonstrate how it can rip it apart. Well, take that and multiply that little small bucket, multiply it to a worldwide flood. What do you suppose a worldwide flood is going to do? In fact, you yourself know that even a local flood is going to rip through dirt. But that's not all. You have, during the flood, and I know many don't know this, but during the flood, you had tsunamis. You had, see, what happened was, in the Earth's core, it kind of did something where it, broke completely open, and lava-like substance went across the planet. And in fact, did you know that all you have to do is look at an Earth's globe and you can see the crack? See, the Bible actually talks about this. The Bible talks about there being a crack, like this Earth opening up. And when you look at a globe, and it would be between the Americas and Africa, and parts of Europe, that ocean there, there's actually a crack that you can clearly see. Well, that's where the Earth split. And so you can clearly see that. And that's just one of the evidences that shows that there was a global flood. Now, also, another thing that happened during the flood was, the floodwaters, covered the earth, so that you have this huge tsunami, like waves crashing. So it's ripping through earth, dirt, destroying, landmarks and things like that. And then you have these tsunamis that, send huge giant waves that carry settlement, that would place settlement on top of settlement, layer on top of layer on top of layer. Then, you have the folding of the layers when, and I don't know exactly when this would have happened or taken place, but you have the folding of the layers. Now the layers would have been flat, or the layers would have been wet, not hard, wet, because the evolutionists will tell you that the bending of the layers happened when they were dry, and happened over time, over millions or billions of years. Well, if you take just a flat rock and try to bend it, what's going to happen to it? It's going to break, isn't it? So we know that that is false, that what the evolutionists are claiming right there would be false. What they claim would be false, because if you try to bend a rock is just going to break. It's not going to bend. In order for these layers to bend, they have to be wet. They have to be soft. Not just wet, but they have to be soft. What would make these layers soft? Water. Being underneath water for a long period of time would eventually make them soft enough, these hard rock type layers. It would make them soft enough to bend and fold. But you need another, you need one other substance. You also need heat for them to bend. But see, just taking, just by applying common sense to what the evolutionists claim, you know that they're full of it. They're full of rubbish. That's all you have to do is apply common sense. What does common sense tell you? Well, I don't know about you, but common sense tells me that if I was to, like, let's say this was a rock, and I was able to, try to bend it, what's going to happen is it's going to snap in half. So then, how can these layers that are sitting one on top of the other that are dry bend? It can't happen. So therefore, what the evolutionists would be claiming would be completely false. And the only other explanation for that is that they would have had to have been submerged underwater for some time. How would these layers gotten underneath water? A global flood. The Genesis flood. That's how they would have gotten underneath water. Well, then, what about the mountains like the Himalayas mountains? Some of those peaks are kind of reach the top of Earth's atmosphere. How did water get that high? Mountains were not very high during the flood. Mountains were pushed up after the flood. So the mountain peaks, or some of the mountain peaks in the Himalayas, would have been pushed up after the flood. See, the flood event isn't just a flood and then all of a sudden after the flood the water drains and everything just stays the same. No. There were still events that happened after the flood. So the flood set off a ripple effect. First you have this, then you have this. Well, then you have more ripple effects, and this would be after the flood. You have other ripple effects after the flood, natural disasters that would have happened after the flood, that took place after the flood. See, the flood was like a precursor to all these other events that happened after. Like, it was the domino that one domino, you have the flood, one domino fell, then the next domino, then the next domino, and you have these domino effects that occurred, just moments before the flood, taking place during the flood, and then after the flood. So now, hopefully, understanding that it wasn't just a flood, it was a series of events that took place one after the other. And so after the flood, there would have been more things that would have happened to cause, the world, to cause mountains to rise up, to cause, the folding to happen, and so on and so forth, to create the world that we see today. And you would be like, well, couldn't God, if he was all powerful, couldn't he send the flood, kill off what he wanted to kill off, and then get everything to go back to the way it was? Yes, technically, yes. But think about this. If God would have done that, there would not be any evidence that there was a flood. See, God is wiser than any one of us. I mean, he's the one that created us, so that makes him wiser. So, what he did is he allowed the earth to be ripped up, torn apart, and left scarred and broken from the flood, so we can find evidence, and we can go back and we can look at that evidence and say, yes, there was a flood. I can see the evidence. Therefore, if you can see the evidence, we can then say, is Genesis just a made-up fairy tale story, or did it actually happen? And being able to see that evidence that of a flood happening, we can see that, Genesis is not fairy tale. We can see that that is a part of this earth's history when we look at the evidence.